midwife working in Sutton Coldfield in the West Midlands. In this short video today, I'm going to be looking at the subject of colostrum harvesting. Colostrum harvesting involves the antenatal hand expression of colostrum from your breast in the later weeks of pregnancy. It has untold benefits to baby and also gives you real reassurance that after baby's born, if for whatever reason you can't establish that early latch, that you have a source of nutrition for baby until your milk comes in on the third day. Now, during this session, we're going to look at what colostrum is and how it benefits the baby. We're also going to look at who would particularly benefit from antenatal hand expression of colostrum. We're going to look at the technique, how to store colostrum and how to use it once baby's born. And then I'm going to share with you a short clip of a recent client who practiced antenatal hand expression and colostrum harvesting. And I think the video speaks for itself in terms of how beneficial she found it. I've got so many of my clients that say without that colostrum that they collected antenatally, they really don't know what they've done in those early days where baby was trying to establish a latch at the breast and to try and work out the mechanics of breastfeeding. Babies are born with a very strong desire to suck, but they do sometimes need a little bit of assistance just getting that initial latch. So as I say, colostrum harvesting, really useful and something that as midwives we absolutely love. Now, colostrum is described as liquid gold and it's produced as early as 12 to 18 weeks in pregnancy. Once baby's born, this fluid, this really precious fluid filled with antibodies and immune factors, is the sole source of nutrition to a breastfed baby until your mature milk comes in. Now, many ladies say to me, well, if I'm actually expressing my colostrum antenatally and harvesting it, will it run out so that when baby's born there isn't any left? But in fact, it continues to be produced. Every time you express colostrum, then more colostrum is made. And once baby's born, as I say, you have just pure colostrum for a couple of days till the mature milk comes in. And once the mature milk does come in, colostrum continues to be produced in the background in the early weeks postnatally. Now, colostrum is loaded with immune factors and antibodies. It's known to actually coat the infant's gut, protect from bacteria. It destroys harmful bacteria too. It acts as a laxative, helping baby to clear their bowel out of that sticky green-black meconium that their bowel is padded with in utero. It's now known that if we can help the baby to evacuate the bowel of meconium fairly early on in their life, then they don't get such deep jaundice. And I've got some strong evidence from my clients to say this, that when they've actually harvested their colostrum and had quite a few syringes to give to baby in those early days, the jaundice that appeared made a quick exit again, and midwives fed back to them that's because of all the colostrum they'd harvested. Now, anybody can express colostrum. And in fact, some of my clients, they have a go, they start off, and for a couple of days, they're ringing me saying, you know, Linda, I can't get anything. I don't think there's any in there. Well, yes, there is. It's all about the technique. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a few moments. There are situations where health professionals would recommend this even more strongly. And this is where if you have diabetes, whether it's gestational diabetes or type 1 or type 2 diabetes, then it would form part of your management plan in later pregnancy from around 36 weeks. And the hospital would provide you with the kit, with the syringes and full instructions, such as the importance of colostrum to a baby born to a diabetic mother. It could be that they've been used to a slightly higher than average blood sugar whilst they're in your womb. And as such, they've been producing more of the hormone insulin to try and lower their blood sugar. Once they're born, they continue to produce that higher level of insulin and they don't need it anymore. And so what happens is their blood sugar can drop. And one of the fantastic ways to prevent this is to give some colostrum, which you've expressed antenatally and harvested, and you've got a good collection of in the freezer. Harvesting colostrum is also useful with a twin pregnancy because obviously you've got double the demand postnatally. So if you get yourself a good supply from 37 weeks into your freezer, then you've got that as backup should your babies be requiring additional comfort in the early days before your milk comes in. Antenatal hand expression of colostrum is also really helpful if your baby is known to have a cleft lip and or palate, because they're going to require some specialist feeding support postnatally, and so whilst the breastfeeding is becoming established, you have the backup of some syringes of colostrum in your freezer. If you're having a caesarean birth, it's a really great idea to have some antenatal colostrum gathered so that postnatally, while you're recovering and getting back on your feet, if you're finding the whole mechanics of latching baby to be a bit of a challenge, you've got that backup again of some colostrum in the freezer ready to feed baby with. Having said that, colostrum harvesting and antenatal hand expression of colostrum is for everyone. It literally is. There are some ladies that say, you know, Linda, I don't want to breastfeed, it's not for me, I'm going to formula feed my baby, but I'd like to give baby some colostrum for a couple of days because I know that it's such a precious fluid. In fact, it's known that there is nothing like colostrum. You can't buy it commercially, it's not included in formula milks, it's completely unique to the human body. And what better way to start baby off than giving them some of that precious colostrum, even if you are moving on to formula milk. Now, I recommend antenatal hand expression to all my clients. When you express colostrum antenatally, your body produces the hormone oxytocin, and this is known to have a softening and ripening effect on the neck of the womb. Antenatal hand expression and colostrum harvesting is also really useful if you've had pre-labour rupture of membranes where your waters are broken, but indeed you don't have any contraction surges. And so what I recommend to my clients in that case is to either do some nipple stimulation or to harvest some colostrum and really pick it up to several times a day. Because once you're doing that, the hormone oxytocin is produced, and this, along with a symphony of other hormones, can help your body move into natural labour. And I think this is a really good use of your time when you are waiting for natural labour to commence after your water's broken. It really is, I would say, something very helpful in the process to do some hand expression at that point. Again, if you've got a planned induction, I recommend highly to my clients doing either nipple stimulation or some hand expression for the reasons we've said, that along with other factors from both yourself and baby which lead to the onset of labour, we know that one of these is the production of oxytocin through hand expression. So it really is helping the whole process. I tend to find that when my clients do need to go for induction and they're in full agreement with this, that having done some colostrum harvesting, more often than not, when they get to the hospital and they have their initial assessment to see how ripe the neck of the womb is before the procedure, we often get some great feedback that the neck of the womb has really softened and shortened and sometimes started to open as well, which in my mind would make the whole induction process a lot more straightforward for you. So there's another really strong benefit. Now, one of the biggest benefits that I see of colostrum harvesting is for babies who are born, and midwives describe them as being mucousy. So that's very much a midwife word, a sort of mucousy baby. And as the baby comes down the birth canal and is born, their chest is compressed and decompressed just prior to the birth, and this should push any fluid out of their lungs because clearly they've been in a swimming pool for 9 months. However, you always get a little bit of residual fluid left over just in the back of their throat, and if you've had a caesarean birth, we tend to find that babies are even more mucousy because they haven't had that decompression of the chest. They've just been lifted out the sunroof. So as such, babies get this mucusiness where they sit there merrily blowing bubbles and handling it beautifully. And it takes babies sometimes about 24 hours to disperse that mucus and to spit it all up. A real skill with breastfeeding where babies have to sort of suck and breathe and swallow. And if they've got a mouthful of mucus, that can be disrupted and they're not as keen to latch. And in comes your colostrum, because we collect it, as I'll show you in a moment, in little 1 ml syringes. And once you've collected it, all you need to do is pop it just gently between baby's lips and depress the plunger on the syringe really slowly. It's absorbed through the roof of baby's mouth. So we are then ensuring that baby is getting a source of nourishment and also all the other benefits that we mentioned earlier on. And don't worry if you've tried it and it doesn't work or it's not for you, because there's enough to feel guilty about when it comes to labour, birth and being a parent. However, do seek some support from your midwife, because midwives really are very keen on this. It has so many benefits, and as I say, to think that you've got lots of syringes of colostrum in your freezer before baby's born gives you that real reassurance. Now, another key time that I recommend colostrum harvesting to my clients is if they start to go over their due date. And this is a really valuable time to do some colostrum harvesting if you haven't already done some, because you're doing something very practical. It's a good distraction technique, but it's also softening and ripening the neck of the womb, as we mentioned. Gives you a focus, and really anything that stops you sort of thinking about, why hasn't baby come? Because once we start getting stressed about why baby hasn't arrived, that can have the opposite effect on putting the brakes on your labour. Now we're going to move on to the technique of colostrum harvesting. It might just be an interesting point just to start off with, to look at just how little baby's tummy is when they're born in the first 3 to 4 days after birth. And that's how big it is. Okay, absolutely tiny, probably about the same size as my thumbnail. It's a tiny, tiny little stomach. It doesn't take much filling. And this is why colostrum is absolutely phenomenal. So apart from having all those anti-infective agents, it's got proteins and fats and sugar. It's not produced in huge volumes. It comes out literally drop by drop, but it's all the baby needs in those early days until the mature milk comes in. Now, before you start thinking about antenatal hand expression of colostrum, what sort of equipment do you need? Well, it's really, really straightforward. You don't need that much at all. In fact, what I recommend to my clients is they purchase some of these 1 ml syringes. So you can either get these, which are used in hospitals, and as I mentioned, some hospitals will give you a stock of these if they are supporting colostrum harvesting as part of your management plan. Or indeed, have a look at this little photograph here. And this is some colostrum harvesting syringes. You can get all of these from Amazon. The difference here, yes, they're a pretty colour, but also they've got a lid on the top, but they are probably twice the cost of these 1 ml syringes. So have a look and work out what suits your budget. Now, we don't recommend the use of manual or electric pumps antenatally when expressing colostrum. That's just not needed, and it can actually stimulate some abdominal cramping, which we don't want. So hand expression is the only recommended way of expressing colostrum antenatally. So we've talked about the syringes, and now let's talk about the technique. So to start off with, just give your hands a good rinse. Choose a time of day where you're fairly relaxed, and you're going to start off just doing it about once a day. From the end of the 36th week is a good time to start. But if you just watch this video in your 39 weeks, start as soon as you can, because it will still give you great benefits. So first and foremost, you need to do some massage of the breast. And we start off massaging the breast and almost looking at the areola here and working around like a clock face with your knuckles, doing a sort of knuckly type massage all the way around with your knuckles. Use 2 hands if you need to. So it's that type of circular massage to start with. Secondly, you can do a sweeping massage. So sweeping down from the chest wall, sweeping down all the way around and underneath as well. Now, the next thing to do is to try and locate the breast milk ducts, and colostrum harvesting isn't about squeezing the nipple. That would A, be painful, and B, be ineffective. It's to do with establishing where the breast milk ducts are. Now, looking at the breast there, the areola around the edge, and you've got these tiny little lumps and bumps, the Montgomery's tubercles. You need to actually pop your fingers either side of the areola in a C-shaped grip and then try and gently feel, just come back from the areola just a little way until you feel a change in texture. And some people liken that to grains of sand or grains of rice. Once you feel that, that's exactly where you need to be compressing during the hand expression procedure. Now, after you've massaged for a few minutes, okay, so you've done the circular massage and you've done the sweeping massage, the great thing to do then is to apply a source of heat to the breast. Some of my clients use a warm flannel and some of them use just a water bottle with a woolly cover on it. This is one of the major success factors to my clients. Using heat tends to revolutionize their whole colostrum harvesting experience. So you've done the massage, you've applied the heat, you've now got that lovely C grip, you've established where the milk ducts are because of the change in texture. And now what you do is press towards the chest wall, then compress forward. Press back to the chest wall and then compress forward. Move around, press, compress, press, compress. And almost like a clock face, move all the way around. Make sure you give equal stimulation to all the ducts individually. Press and compress. Now you notice I'm not sliding my fingers down because that will cause soreness, and I'm not tweaking the nipple to squeeze it, and I'm keeping my fingers as far as possible on the edge of the areola. Let's see it again. Press, compress, release. Press, compress, release. Press, compress, release. So get yourself a little rhythm going. Now to start off with, you might not see too much happening. So we do about 3 minutes on that side and then move to the other side 3 minutes again. So you've done your massage, you've warmed the breast, C grip, press, compress, release. Press, compress, release. 3 minutes on that side. Now come back to 2 minutes on this side and 2 minutes again. So it's 5 minutes each side, split into 2 sessions. Now on the second session, this is when ladies often see the colostrum start to appear. It starts off as tiny little droplets of clear fluid. This precious colostrum starts off clear. As it starts to increase over the next couple of days, you'll start to see the yellow, orange, liquid gold colour. Now, once you start to see some of the clear colostrum appearing, get your syringe and just hoover it up, literally hoover it up. And any little droplets, you might find this a little bit awkward, so you might want to get your partner involved. And then when you've got a little droplet in the end there, you want to try and store it so you don't have any air bubbles. So you might want to flick it, just flick it like that and get everything, sort of get all the air bubbles released, and then just push it right up, and then carry on massaging and syringing. So it is often great, something you could do with your partner to get them involved antenatally. And once you start doing this for a couple of days and you tend to find then that the volume increases, you might find it easier to actually express it onto a clean spoon. It doesn't matter, you know, tablespoon, something like that, but make sure it's really clean. And then suck all the colostrum off the spoon with your syringe, and then just store the syringes, which we're going to talk about next. So there's a little bit about how to express your colostrum. Now, anything you've collected in the syringe, ideally after 24 hours, goes into the freezer. So to start off with, the first day, you might decide that you're just going to do it once. And the whole technique takes about 15 minutes. 5 minutes for the massaging and the warm flannels or the water bottle, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. And at the end of that, on day one, you might find that you've got a tiny, tiny, tiny amount, about 0.01 of a mil, but celebrate that because it means it's started to flow. After 24 hours, if there's no more being collected in there, you need to pop it into its little paper case. I tend to date and time it, and then put it in a Tupperware box or a Ziploc bag and straight in the freezer. And that can be kept there for 6 months. So if you find you don't need it postnatally, baby does latch well, there's no need for any colostrum that you've harvested, you can keep it in there for later on because you will definitely use it at some point in the first 6 months. And if not, there's nothing lost. because baby still had colostrum fresh from your breast at birth, and there's no harm done. If anything, far more benefit of doing it than not doing it. Now, as you start to pick up the pace, so I would say after a couple of days, increase to twice a day. And as you're approaching your due date, I'd actually be doing at least 3 times a day. So it does take a bit of commitment, but 15 minutes each time. And at that point, you may be actually getting 2 full syringes at a time or more. I mean, some of my clients have literally produced 100 of these in the period up to the birth of their baby. So remember, at the end of 24 hours, whatever is in there needs to be popped into the little packet again and then put into the freezer. So let's look now at the day of birth. So if you're having a home birth, great. You're in your own home, the colostrum safely in the freezer. If you should require it in that early period, going into hospital or a birth centre for a birth, then grab a handful again, put them into a bag with an ice block. When you get to the hospital, let the midwife know that you've got some harvested colostrum. They will be thrilled to bits. And again, after the birth, we initially attempt to get baby onto the breast. Great if they go on, but if they just need a little bit of time to come round from the birth, or if they're very mucousy, then we've got some colostrum, and again, we can defrost it quickly and give it to baby. As I mentioned earlier on, it's very, very straightforward. It's literally a matter of just popping this in between their lips, very slowly depressing the plunger on the syringe. And you see them licking their lips. So it's a very gentle procedure, and it's absorbed through the roof of their mouth. So that's absolutely wonderful. If they've got a mouthful of mucus, it doesn't get affected. And we know babies had all that protein, fat, sugars, all of the early sustenance to maintain their blood sugar, and all of those precious antibodies which give baby that first line of defence following birth. So we've covered quite a lot there, what colostrum is and why it would benefit baby postnatally, and how to express your colostrum. And now I'd like to end with a video of a client of mine that recently did some colostrum harvesting, and I think the video speaks for itself.
So from 37 weeks I was advised to try colostrum harvesting, and I found it really difficult to begin with, to the point where over 5 days I managed to express about 0.8 of a mil, so it wasn't even filling up the little syringes that I'd been advised to store it in. The advice was heat, so to try a hot water bottle on the boob and give it a really good massage. So after doing this for a couple of days, I started to notice that there was an increase in supply. I think probably after about 4 or 5 days, I was getting to the point where I was managing to fill up about 5 or 6 syringes a day. So, you know, that's kind of like 5 or 6 mil a day. And it got to the point just before my due date where I was able to fill up about 12 syringes a day. And I just used to express onto a sterile spoon and then just literally suck the liquid up with the syringes and then store them in the freezer after I'd collected it. Now, when my little boy was born, at 40 weeks on his due date, which may or may not have had something to do with the hand expressing, I'm not sure. It was a magical birth. We had a lovely experience. It was a water birth. I was hypnobirthing. The whole experience was incredible. And afterwards, he did feed for about 40 minutes, but that's where it all kind of started to go downhill, feeding wise, because it turned out he was too warm, so he wasn't waking for any feeds. Which was obviously really concerning because no matter what I did, I just couldn't get him to latch on properly. So again, after some asking for some advice from the midwives, they came round to help. It was a case of really trying to wake him up, cool him right down to wake him up. And I'd explained that I'd actually got the colostrum in the freezer, so it was a case of, right, let's get as much of this as defrosted as possible and let's start pumping at least 1 mil, 2 mil every single time we went to give him a feed, which in the first kind of 24 hours to 48 hours was every 2 hours we were waking him up to feed him. supplying him with, you know, 2, sometimes even 3 ml of colostrum, and then straight on the breast to, you know, to feed. And he was only feeding for about 5 or 10 minutes, so the colostrum was really, really important to keep his liquid, like his fluids up, especially because this was when we had the 30-degree heat outside. So after kind of day 3, I think it was, the midwife came out to weigh him, and obviously she'd said that because he's a breastfed baby, they can obviously like drop the weight by at least 10%, drop the birth weight by at least 10%. So we were a little bit nervous because we were obviously rough start, so we were kind of thinking, oh, maybe it's going to be a bit, you know, a bit more than 10%. And actually 10% of his birth weight would have been 380 grams, and he'd only lost 20 grams. So it was amazing news, really, the fact that he'd you know, almost bounced back with this feeding experience. And then day 5 came, where he had the heel prick test and weighed again, and he'd actually put on 8 ounces. Now, I swear this is down to the fact that we were using the colostrum. I still have a little bit left in the freezer, which I'm happy to kind of store for about 6 months, which, you know, maybe I'll use if he goes through his immunisations or something like that. I've heard that it can help kind of soothe them. But yeah, so I've had a really, really good experience with the colostrum harvesting, and I would highly recommend it to all new mums, just because you never know what's going to happen after birth. I mean, we had the most amazing birth experience, but then a terrible 24 hours after, purely just because of the weather, the heat, and him not feeding. And obviously in other circumstances, you know, if you don't have the birth experience that you want, if you ended up having an emergency Caesarean or something, for example, and you needed to get some of your, you know, good nutritious colostrum into the baby, then yeah, colostrum harvesting is literally a lifesaver. It stopped us from having to use bottles, which I really didn't want to use.
So I do hope that you found this video valuable, and if you'd like to have a go at colostrum harvesting, do mention it to your midwife, and she can give you some support and advise you on things like syringes, and look at your technique and go over some of the points that I've made in this video. Thanks for watching.